Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever this episode may find you, and welcome to the final installment of Patriot Chat. I'm your host, Eric Ye, and thank you for joining us. That's right, you heard it correctly. This is the series finale, if you will, of Patriot Chat. As always, we have a great show for you all. Episode 12 will contain only one segment, the one you're watching right now. There's no title for this segment, but we will be reflecting back on the past school year. And what an interesting school year it was, to say the least. So, without further ado, let's get started. Oh, where to begin? Where to begin? Let's first rewind back to the 2019-2020 school year. Did you know that this podcast was originally geared to cover Wooten High School sports? That's right. When Ms. Starr first asked me to run the Common Sense podcast, it was going to cover Wooten sports. Then March 2020 came around, and I'm sure you know what happened after that. I still remember when they first announced that we were going to be going on a 2-week early spring break. I genuinely thought it would only last 2 weeks. COVID-19 has changed so much in our lives. Who knew that it would be normal to walk into a bank with a mask on to make a withdrawal of money? Anyways, we're not going to talk too much about COVID, as I'm sure you're tired of hearing it. So coming into the 2020-2021 school year, the podcast idea was uncertain, as school sports at the time were uncertain. I had to completely revamp the content to what we have now, a news and entertainment podcast. So we began the school year completely virtual on August 31st, 2020. And I'm sure you remember the MyMCPS troubles we had on the first day. Well, that's where the podcast journey starts. And on September 18th, 2020, we released our first episode, which at the time the show was called the Common Sense Podcast. And I know, it's not the most creative name. Episode 1 contained 3 segments titled News Brief, What Did You Do, and Get to Know Me. And as the year went along, you, the audience, were introduced to a bunch of new segments, the challenge zone, the discussion, and much more. And on March 6th, 2021 came a huge change. I'm talking massive. We had a name change. And now you know the podcast to be called Patriot Chat. Shout out to Younga for creating an amazing logo, absolutely fire. Looking back, I'm proud of the content I've created. Doing this podcast and conducting the different segments, I came away with something every time. For the news briefs, it made me follow the news more in depth than how I used to. I didn't just want to cover the big news stories you hear like on the nightly newses. I also wanted to cover the story that you don't hear about a lot. For these segments where I had guests on, it was great to reconnect with people and the school community during a virtual age. Probably one of my favorite episodes was episode 9, the one about Wooten's reopening guidelines. That was a huge project, but a lot of fun planning, shooting, and editing, and putting everything together. So yeah, I can't believe the school year, well, for me, I can't believe it's almost over. It hasn't sinked in yet that I'm going to be saying goodbye to Wooten this Friday, May 28th. I think for a lot of us seniors right now, we have tunnel vision as we're pushing through to the finish line, focusing on completing all the assignments we have because we have a hard deadline. So who knows, maybe I'll be emotional afterwards or during graduation. To my fellow seniors, I know this is not how we imagined our final year of high school would be. We missed out on a lot. But through it all, we accomplished so much. I mean, we applied to college in the middle of a pandemic. And yeah, looking back, it was stressful, but each step was a milestone, from finishing the applications to getting decisions and finally committing. This year just showed how resilient we were as a class. Um, when the Board of Ed approved in-person learning, I jumped on that right away. And honestly, I've enjoyed my time back. Being able to see my friends and teachers and walk through the building one more time. You know, there's certain feeling you get when you're a senior and you're at the top of the food chain walking around in the building. For me, it was nice to get that back because come this fall, we're all about to be fresh meat again. So I know it wasn't for everyone. As a class, we adapted so quickly that we got into a groove of virtual learning. Common Sense adapted so well too, under the great leadership of Ms. Starr and the versatility of the staff. We transitioned to online so quickly. Of course, we didn't forget our roots and came out with 3 great magazines that I believe will be continuing next year, but don't quote me on that. I know the seniors on the Common Sense staff for this last cycle, many of them are also reflecting on this past school year. I highly encourage the underclassmen, especially the juniors, to read those articles because there's a lot of great advice being passed down. Just real quick, some advice that came to my head about college applications is to start early. Start early on your research of the schools and the essays. I know for myself, geez, who knows how many drafts and versions I wrote. And now come the thank yous and final remarks. First, to the class of 2021, because there's no one like us, and there never will be. Cheers. I wish everyone the best of luck in their future endeavors wherever you go. Thank you to the guests that have come on the show. Thank you to the Common Sense staff who've helped me with content and have made me feel so welcome. And of course, thank you, Ms. Starr, for being so supportive and trusting me with the direction that I wanted to take this podcast. It was always a joy to attend newspaper class, and I truly loved my time at Common Sense and will miss it. So, that'll do it for this final episode of Patriot Chat. I'm Eric Ye, saying one last time, so long, and go Patriots.